Once again, we are here at Digesting Black History 365 podcast. We thank you so much for you guys tuning in because we want you to like us, subscribe to us, and then we want you to share. So please come on back. You know, we do this monthly, but what we're trying to do is enable everybody to understand about Black history, positive Black history. And today we have the one and only Prince Wells III. We are so glad that this historian, this Black historian is on with us because it gives you an understanding of what it means to come back to your history, no matter if it's business, entertainment, sports, or technology. We want to bring that to you. So, great afternoon to you, Mr. Prince Wells III.
Glad to be here.
All right, all right. So could you just give us a little backstory on who you are and how you got into music?
Well, I'm a trumpet player. I would not describe myself as a historian. I think Glenn Moore is a historian. I'm not inclined to describe myself as being a historian, but I'm a trumpet player. I'm a musician. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, Illinois, right across the river from St. Louis. Literally right across the river from North St. Louis. I could watch them build the Gateway Arch from my house, right? So little town, Brooklyn, Illinois. And fortunately, I went to Lovejoy School there, and George Hudson was the band teacher. And I think that George Hudson is probably the biggest name in jazz in St. Louis. There are some other people that were from here. And the key word is that they're from here. They left, like Michael Davis and Clark Terry, Oliver Nelson, and all these folks. But George was based here. And all of those people I just named and many, many more were very much influenced by George Hudson. So interestingly, he ended up being the music teacher at my school, at Lovejoy School. And that's how I started playing the trumpet. So he had a long and impressive list of students who went on and accomplished great things. And so I was fortunate. And then I went to SIUE and majored in music education. And then I taught for 2 years at Lovejoy School with George Hudson.
Wow.
Okay.
And then I quit my job. And I don't know if this is the kind of stuff you want to hear, but
yes, please.
Principal name was Leo Triplett. He thought I was insane. I quit my job to go to grad school. I packed my car up. I had a Datsun B210, a 1977 Datsun B210. I packed it up and drove to Boston to go to grad school. I didn't even have a place to stay that night. I stayed at the YMCA near New England Conservatory, where I went to school. So I went to school there and did 2 years there, majored in Afro-American music.
Okay.
And when I got out, I did a lot of stuff. I played with Albert King, which was a lot of fun. Blues musician. Are you familiar with Albert King?
Oh, yeah.
I am, but I have to just chime in because you have a connection to my cousin.
Who was that?
Her name is Joyce Houston.
Oh yeah, George took my place in Albert King's band.
Oh wow.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's my cousin, and
Yeah.
we have a great connection. I'll have her on soon, and you know, we really have a good connection between us three. So she been performing quite a bit, but yeah, she definitely just had an event not too long ago, and she paid tribute to Albert King.
Joyce is always doing something. You know, she's a really good trumpet player, and she was just a kid when I met her. I think it was 1981 when I left Albert King's band, and she literally replaced me. And I met her and her mother, and I've known her since then. But she's a really good musician and a great entertainer as well.
I was just getting ready to say entertainer because you know that boa, she gets to throw that boa right.
Can I ask you a question, Prince? After you were taught by Hudson, who was this legendary musician,
Mhm.
and what was it like teaching with him after being his student?
Well, that's a good question, and I could talk a lot about that. People who knew me and certainly knew him call me his musical son. They say that all the time. And I never really thought about it, but so many people say that I just have to accept it. So I had the greatest respect for him. And we taught at Lovejoy School. I taught there and he was teaching there too. We shared the same office. We co-directed the bands. We taught 3rd grade through 8th grade music classes and conducted the high school band. And I will say literally that by that time, he had forgotten more about music than I would ever know. I can't tell you how knowledgeable and experienced he was as a teacher, because he's not often thought about as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at some of the great musicians that he produced, then he's just like Kenneth Billups and some of the other legendary Black teachers in the St. Louis area. You don't even have to talk about them. Just look at who they taught, who they produced, and you'll see these people had to be great. They had to be great. And he was one of them. He launched the careers of many professional top level musicians. And there he was teaching at Lovejoy School. So it was a lot of fun. He liked me and I liked and respected him. So it was a great situation for me to be in the classroom with this guy 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day. And then after that, go rehearse with him in his band. The only person that spent more time with him was his wife. And that was because she slept with him at night. If it wasn't for that, I would spend more time with him than anybody. Yeah.
So you played in his band as well?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
From the time I was in college, in my undergrad, when I would start playing with his band, because he knew how I played, and when he needed a trumpet player, he'd call me, and pretty soon I was a regular in his professional band. So, oh yeah, he was real good. He was a mentor. He was my first and maybe most important musical mentor. Not just me, but many other people too. Yeah, really something.
So, Mr. Wells, can I ask you a question? Who were some of the students that he taught that went on to promise, and a great future?
Well, they all, Clark Terry.
Besides yourself.
Oh, I'm down on the list, right? I mean, Clark Terry is probably the most notable, but Ahmad Jamal,
Yeah.
Ernie Wilkins. I don't know if you even know Ernie Wilkins. He's the guy that
Ahmad Jamal, I do.
Ernie Wilkins wrote that arrangement. He resurrected Count Basie's band when the big band period was fizzling. And Ernie Wilkins wrote that song for Joe Henderson, Every Day I Have the Blues. Remember that?
Yeah.
Ernie Wilkins wrote that arrangement. Ernie Wilkins was an incredible composer and arranger for Count Basie and others. He was a ghostwriter for Quincy Jones, who was doing a lot of commercial movies and other stuff, soundtracks.
Oh, yeah.
Ernie Wilkins was incredible. So Ernie Wilkins, Clark Terry, Hammett Blewett. I don't know if you know Hammett Blewett, who's part of
that name. I've heard that name.
When can you want to talk about Hammett, or do you?
Well, you talk about Hammett. I know that he's from Brooklyn as well, isn't he?
I grew up a block and a half from him. Yeah. He's a few years older than me. He passed away about 6 or 7 years ago. Well, Hammett was the #1 baritone saxophone player in the country, as recognized by Downbeat magazine. He was the #1 jazz saxophonist in the country for, I don't know, 20, 25 years. Incredible, incredible. Then there were other people like a guy named Ricky Perkins, who you probably wouldn't recognize because he moved away from here. But that was a long list of musicians just from Little Brooklyn, right? And
Mhm.
just to mention, Albert King lived in Brooklyn too. I don't know if you knew that.
I
I
didn't
lived
know
two
that.
blocks. I
Yeah,
lived two
they
blocks from Albert
actually,
King.
yeah, they actually spoke about that. She did a Q&A after
Mhm.
she did the performance, and she spoke about his time here. His actually he they brought in his brother and his daughter.
I didn't know his kids. Yeah.
Yeah. They brought them in. They spoke about the time that he was here, and he was in Kansas City, I believe, for a little while. And he kind of moved around, but he was here more than he was anywhere else. So
Yeah.
that was a great event, and something to know about him. And then it was his grandson. I
Oh,
take that back. That was his grandson because he looks so much like Albert. Oh my
did
goodness.
he? Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then they had this one guy who was talking about when they used to have little gunfights. He always carried a gun with him. So
He was a tough
I
customer.
said, man, them days back then, they say you got grease on your fingers. You done played your guitar, you eating grease, and you pulling out a gun. That's too much for me.
He had a pistol on him at all times. I don't even know how he got it through the airports, but he had a pistol on him all the time. Yeah.
You first you mentioned Clark Terry, and I don't know if I know that he's a celebrated musician from
Mhm.
this area, and I just want to mention that you got the first annual, what is it called, the Clark Terry Ambassador of
Yes.
Jazz Award.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Congratulations.
That's from
No,
Jazz St. Louis.
yes,
But
Louis.
can you talk about Clark Terry, your relationship with Clark Terry, and why you got that award, as a matter of fact?
Well, all right. If I get too long-winded, you got to stop me.
Oh, go ahead.
I met Clark Terry through George Hudson. Uh, Clark Terry was from South St. Louis and the near South Side at a time when very few Blacks lived on the South Side. My dad talked about this all the time, that Clark Terry's family lived on the South Side.
Hmm.
And so Clark got his start in George Hudson's band. And he talked about George all the time. You can look up Clark Terry and George Hudson on the internet, and you'll get lots of hits because George Hudson was very influential with Clark. So I applied for a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts when I was a senior at SIUE, and I got the grant. And they paid, I got enough money to go to New York the summer of 1977 and spend the summer with Clark Terry, thanks to George Hudson and other people. George gave me the introduction. And when you come well referred like that, it opens doors for you. And so, while I was there, George Hudson sent me on an errand to Miles Davis's house because Miles Davis knew George Hudson too. And so I was staying with Clark Terry, and I visited Miles Davis at his house to give him a mouthpiece that George Hudson wanted to send him. And so this was the summer of 1977. Miles thought highly of George Hudson. He also thought highly of Eddie Randall, who gave Miles Davis his start. Eddie Randall that owned Randall and Son Funeral Home.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
The
yes.
old man Eddie Randall. Well,
Hmm.
this is who got Miles Davis started while Miles was still at Lincoln High School in East St. Louis, playing in a high school band and sitting in with Eddie Randall's band.
Wow.
You ought to talk to Eddie Randall Jr. He's got lots of stories about his dad and Miles Davis. Yeah. So I went to Miles's house because George Hudson sent me there, and it was an experience. I've never known a person to curse so much, right? I told Clark Terry when I got back to Clark Terry's house, Clark Terry started talking about the autobiography of Miles Davis, he said that the book is this thick, but if you take the word MF out of that book, it's only this thick. So anyway, so I ended up, I spent time with Clark, and we were good friends ever since 1977. And when the award was because of my close affiliation with him, and also because the guy that hosted the event was a former student of mine at SIUE. I taught music theory there. And a lot of the students at Jazz St. Louis have graduated from the SIUE jazz program. And I've taught most of them. You know, they're like 30, 40 years old now, but I had them in my music theory class. So they all know me. And that's how I ended up getting the award. I told them my Clark Terry stories, Miles Davis stories in class.
Well, first of all, I think you're being too modest. You got that award not just because of your relationship, but because of your long career in music and your contributions to jazz.
Well, yeah, maybe. Okay, all right. But yeah, I've been a jazz musician here for decades now. Yeah.
Mr. Wells, let me ask you a question. As music is today, and you go back, like, say,
you cut out. Could you say that again?
I say, as music is today.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just watched a documentary that was dealing with auto tunes. When you first even crossed your eardrums, how did you feel about auto tunes and the way you taught music and performed music? What are your thoughts about auto tune?
Well, I don't think about it a lot. I'm a musician. And, I've spent, 18 years in college and high school and undergrad, grad, and other certifications. So I'm a musician, and auto tune has to do with technology. Technology is just a tool, but I'm a musician. So I don't think about that a lot, but I do draw a distinction between technology and machines and people and what people learn and people's skills. So I've heard a couple of auto-tune things that are very interesting, but I haven't watched the documentary, and so I don't know what it's about.
Yeah, it just came on Netflix. I actually watched it, and it went into this guy. His background was in it, but he first started out as a rapper. Then he started doing auto tunes, and then he also did a little snippet of doing music without it, and he sounded really good without it. Mm-hmm. But this leads me to the next question, because really that was like a two-parter. What's the age that you would start a young man, a young woman off with the trumpet, or even this learning scales and different things like that? What is the age that you would start a young man or a young woman off in music?
That's a music education type question. I started in the 5th grade. I was about 10, maybe 10 or 11 when George Hudson started us actually playing instruments. Playing the trumpet. But before that, I've taught 3rd grade with the little flutophones and recorders where people learn how to read music, how to play an instrument, play together. I think that the traditional music education has it about right, where a kid, a youngster can start playing an instrument when they're 6, 7, 8 years old. Of course, they're not going to play the tuba or string bass. They're not going to, you got to do
trombone.
Yeah, the trombone, they may not be, their arms won't be long enough.
Right.
But instruments that they can play, at SIUE, they have the Suzuki string program, and little people play these little violins, right? And so they can start very young. And so I don't think there's an age limit, not in my opinion.
So how did you choose the trumpet, or did the trumpet choose you?
Well, in this interview, I'm going to be using the name George Hudson a lot. I liked the trumpet, but what did I know? I was just a kid. I'd never, but George gave me a trumpet. For some reason, he gave me a trumpet to play, and he thought I'd be able to play it. So I did not say I want to be a trumpet player. He gave trombones to some kids, he gave tubas, he gave the oboe to a couple of people, and he started me out on the trumpet, and I liked it. I practiced a lot. I tortured my parents, my mother and my father and my sister. They heard it, it was brutal. Trumpet's loud, and when you're starting out, it sounds bad, but I enjoyed it. And stop me if I talk too much, but you would be surprised what people learn about working with other folks by playing in a band. Because football players, they work on their plays, and they you go this way, I go that way, and you do this. You're playing as an ensemble. You work as a unit in a band. You as a trumpet player, you work as a unit. You blend and balance with the trombones, the flutes, the saxophones, the oboes, the French horns. So this is a skill that is very valuable, and people need to look at it that way. There's no other unit in education that really gives a kid that kind of background and experience. And I've never heard a kid say, "I'm so sorry I learned to play the trumpet. I'm so sorry I learned to play the piano. I just wish I had learned to play the flute." Nobody ever says anything like that. People love it. So
yeah, well, see, that's another reason why I never stop any of my guests, because you all are like teachers, and
okay.
this is what Digested Black History 365 is about. We want to get to hear everything that you guys can give us in a short amount of time, because I always be thinking like, hey, I'm eventually stretch it out to be a little longer, but hey, the time that we have, we want to get all the information that we can. So I got one more question.
All right.
The thing that I look at right now with Black history and all the things that's kind of going on today, when you were coming through along with your group, the Clark Terrys, the Miles Davis, and different things like that, how did you all deal with the times back then versus like how times are now? Because it's almost like it's mimicking itself, but from a musician standpoint.
I'm trying to understand exactly what you're asking me.
Well, the times, basically like how we dealing with racism, how we dealing with all the different things like that. I know it's a pretty broad question, but you got to think about, I've listened to the documentaries. I mean, I watched the documentaries, listened to some of the audio tapes on Miles Davis and different things like that. But I seen it from his perspective.
Yeah.
But I'm just asking it from your perspective. How did you deal with those times, and as it mimics what we're dealing with today?
Well, I don't think things have changed that much. It is like slavery ended 1865. What is that? How many years? I don't know. I'm not good at math. Was it about 170 years ago, something like that? And some of the laws and policies have changed, but the practices have not changed. So the discrimination and the racism and the lack of opportunity that results from the discrimination and the racism, these things are still in place. St. Louis has a reputation, in my opinion, of driving away the most talented Black musicians that we have, because there's no upward mobility. Where are you going to go, right? You get your stuff together, and where are you going to go? What's the next level? And the thing is, there is no next level. Even the little clubs that people used to work in, those clubs don't even exist anymore. So you got Jazz St. Louis. There may be a couple of other places, but as far as the Black community, music has been undermined in the Black community. And I'll say this, and I'll say it again. You got to stop me if I talk too much. But when I was young, and I was born in 1953. I'm not talking about the 1920s. When I was young, Vashon, Beaumont, Sumner, these schools had incredible music programs.
Right.
You would go to a parade, Little Lovejoy, we had like maybe 30, 40 people in our band. These big schools in St. Louis would have like, I don't know, 100 people in the band or more. And you don't see that now. You see what I see, like drum lines and majorettes. The music programs were completely destroyed. And you don't see the number and the quality of the students coming out of those schools just going and populating the professional ranks like they did at one time. So the fact that the schools and the school music programs, I think in the 70s, they cut the budget for them, thinking that, they were going to focus on the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And they destroyed a whole culture. And so they've never recovered. So there's a lack of opportunity. What I remember when I came back from grad school is the new musicians had boom boxes. You can see people walking down the street with boom boxes, right? But they didn't play instruments anymore because the music programs were destroyed, except for at Lincoln High School in East St. Louis. East St. Louis kept their music program. St. Louis, the board, they voted to defund all those things. Well, getting back to my point, music and the musical culture was great. You've had Grace Bumry, Robert McFerrin. You had some incredible people come from here. Robert McFerrin, you can't get any better than him, or Grace Bumry. This is just classical people in classical music, right? And then the jazz people and the R&B people. We have an incredible legacy. We drive them all away because there's no next level in St. Louis. You're going to just stay relegated to playing in little clubs, or you're going to leave here seeking other opportunities, like Gwen's brother, Marvin Horn, who's I see him on Facebook all the time. This guy's he's about my age. He is an incredible guitarist. Kelvin Bell, all these other folks, Ronnie Barrage, all these people are about my age, and they left here so long ago that you don't even recognize Kelvin Bell. You don't even know that name. Ronnie Barrage, folks like that. Bruce Purse. They got out of here because they could not stay here and make a living. They'd be driving a bus or, something like that. So it's rough. It's been rough since slavery ended, and it was even rougher before that, right? So St. Louis had what's possibly the first Black musicians union in the country, Local 44. And white St. Louis waged war on that organization from the very beginning. They were sought to undermine and destroy this union, and they did, to the point where no one ever knows it even existed now. Then another Black union came along, Local 197, and it got undermined and destroyed as well. So every attempt to organize and build an industry to support Black musicians in St. Louis gets undermined and destroyed, every single one. And so there's not a lack of talent. You've got some incredible people. Am I talking too much?
No,
absolutely not.
No.
Take the Bosman twins. These guys are second generation jazz musicians. Their dad was an outstanding jazz musician. These guys are incredible. Multi-instrumentalist. Daryl Mixon, who is a bass player, second generation. His daddy was outstanding. And Daryl is outstanding, right? You've got these people who don't lack talent. What they've lacked is the kind of opportunity that comes with upward mobility. There's been no place for them to go, right? So there's no symphony like the St. Louis Symphony or all these other, the Muni and the Fox and all these other institutions that support white musicians in St. Louis and provide artistic and economic opportunity for them. There's no place that does that for us. It's woefully sad. So that's the answer to your question.
Well, let me say something. You know,
Go ahead.
you are a historian. You're
Okay.
a historian of African American music and so much more. But you talk about these lack of opportunities for African American musicians. Maybe this seems like, I don't know if this is the correct question. I think I know the answer, or if there is an answer. How do you rectify that?
Well, it's going to be, I think that we will have to recognize our plight and understand that only we will be able to save ourselves. There's only one source in the world for African-American music, and that's the African-American musician. Mm-hmm. Everybody seems to make a living and do real good off of it, except us. So if we understand that we will perish if we don't organize and come up with a plan and work that plan and revise it, a multi-generational plan, long after I'm dead, long after we're dead and gone, we still need to have an idea of the situation that we're in here. For example, I was affiliated with the Black Music Society back in the 80s and 90s, up until around 2005. There have been so many other organizations, not like the Black Artists Group. Mm-hmm. There was the Clarence Hayden Wilson Music Guild. Never heard of it, right?
No.
It was the local affiliate of the National Association of Negro Musicians. You can look them up on the internet. I actually belong to it. I got an email from them this morning. Clarence Hayden Wilson was an outstanding music educator here in St. Louis. And the local chapter of the National Association of Negro Musicians was named after him. This is before Kenneth Billups even, right? The Black classical musicians need, the Clarence Hayden Wilson Music Guild disappeared. Lack of support, no real plan. The people who were 100% dedicated to it, they just burned out. No other people took their place. And so they just kind of disappeared. And the same thing with the Black Music Society. And the same thing with every other organization that endeavors to promote Black musicians and Black music. So the Black musicians and the community need to understand that this is important to all of us. It's not just a bunch of people singing and musicians playing in clubs. Mm-hmm. It's the number one cultural element for us. And culture for us is of primary importance. You can't underestimate it, but we don't pay attention to it. We really don't. So we don't know the history. Like the Clarence Hayden Wilson Music Guild. We don't even know who Clarence Hayden Wilson was, right? So, but if you ask someone like Dr. Doris Wilson, who was the music teacher, music professor at Harris Stowe up until about 10 or 12 years ago, she's still here. Incredible musician. These are people that I look up to, right? Dello Thetford, who he's not just a gospel choir director, he's an incredible musician. Robert Ray, incredible musician. You've got these people, but
I heard Robert Ray.
Yeah. But what organization supports them? The Legend Singers. Mm-hmm. There are only two choirs in the United States that focus on spirituals, not gospel, spirituals. And may I digress, I like to ask people, hey, what's the difference between gospel and spirituals? And We don't even study our own music. We don't know, right? We don't place a value on these things. So back to Doris Wilson and the legend singers. I think they might be 60 or 70 years old by now. Kenneth Billups started them a long time ago. The Fisk Jubilee singers are more popular. They've been around since the end of slavery.
Right.
And then there's the legend singers right behind them. And they're right here in St. Louis, and they're very good. And they should have all the kind of community and cultural support. They should be nationally known, and they're not, and they're good. And Dr. Wilson is the director of them. We don't support our own. I don't know what we're doing with our, people buy a $1,500 cell phone and pay a couple $100 a month for a bill, but we don't have a plan for supporting and perpetuating our own culture. So, Gwen, to answer your question, we don't have a plan. We don't work together. And that's something that it's not impossible. Everybody else is working together, and they seem to be working against us, right? But we can work together. We can work together, but we don't.
Well, see, that's why this has been created. And I've been talking with Gwen over the last 3 years about putting Digestive Black History 365 together. And it's now. It's now. And for whatever I can do, and the way I can connect people like yourself, Gwen, other people who know this history, we need to get it out here. And that's why this is so important. This is vital. And now that I'm listening to you and everything, I want to, interview these people who I don't know anything about, because that's one of the things that we want to always put in place is people who we don't know anything about, people that's sleeping on. Because my thing is, and I'm gonna probably get a shirt that puts, do you know your Black history? If not, Google it. Because most of the stuff out here is Googleable. Is that a word? Googleable?
Yeah.
So that's what we're getting ready to do. That's why, you are our third guest. So now, we're getting ready to turn it up a notch and start having events and stuff where we can bring people out, small crowds, but giving them an understanding, like I was telling Gwen, we want to probably do a coffee mug and a journal, so those things are very essential, because like if somebody say, read about this person, pick this person's album up, go back in the history and remember this person. So that's incredible. And I think that's going to be like the backdrop to what Gwen had asked you, because I was thinking about that very question. How could we get a union going now with all the different things that has happened? They shut it down. But is that something that can really be transformed, a rebirth as of today?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Gwen's brother, Gerald Horn, Dr. Gerald Horn. Gwen, do you ever talk about him?
No.
This guy is phenomenal. I talk about him.
Good.
His book, Jazz and Justice. People need to read this book, particularly if you're a musician, because you need to see and learn what is standing in opposition to you, what opposes you. There's a plan in place to completely undermine your livelihood and career, to deprive you of every possible opportunity. And it's not a new plan. This has been operating. It's almost like Black people weren't really brought here. We didn't migrate here. We were brought here not to participate in any American dream, but to make an American dream possible for other people, right? Yeah. And that's been the story of us. This is the plight that we need to understand. You cannot tell me when there was a time when times were good for Black musicians. It's never existed, not on this soil. It has never existed. There are some people that kind of punch through, like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, people like that, even Miles Davis and other folks. But these people were incredibly talented, and they never got their due. They never got their due. John Coltrane never really got his due. So they turn to drugs. I mean, they have to medicate themselves to deal with the racism. Billie Holiday, they have to medicate themselves to deal with the racism, where people that don't even measure up to them in any way had incredible careers, great artistic opportunities, great financial opportunities. But the African-American musicians there was no golden age. It's been a struggle. And that's what you get when you read Gerald Horne's book, Jazz and Justice. You don't just apply it to jazz, though. Apply it to everything. Apply it to gospel. Apply it to every R&B, and you'll see that to appropriate this culture and suppress the musicians has been the agenda. That's the agenda. I deal with it, right? And all of my people that I know, we all deal with it.
Yeah.
So Gerald Horne's book, I'm doing a commercial for his book, Jazz and Justice. All the musicians ought to buy it and read it twice. Read it twice.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I didn't want to brag on my brother, so I'm glad you brought it up.
This guy is, I say he's the Duke Ellington of history. Duke Ellington didn't have to play songs by any other musician. He did his own stuff. He wrote his own stuff and he played his own repertoire. And Gerald Horne's in the class by himself. He doesn't even have to cite other people's work. He can just cite his own work. He's written so much and his research is so great that he doesn't have to refer to other people's stuff. He might do it, but he doesn't need to. He's an outstanding scholar. If we want to build a better future, we need to study the works of people like Gerald Horne to help us understand what we're up against. His stuff is going to be more famous in the future than it is now. I guarantee it. I wish I'd be here to see it.
Well, no, we're going to try to make sure that some of that stuff is going to be presented, especially to our youth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many people my age, I'm 55, so there's so many people my age who don't slow down enough so they can learn about the history, because that's why I've gotten really engrossed in it, because I look at these babies. It's like, here it is, you can buy them all these tennis shoes and jeans and stuff like that, but at least put them in a position where they can at least sit back in those jeans and tennis shoes and listen. I think that's one of the biggest part about history right now, the listening part, because just like we know that if they hear the right thing, they're going to react to it, like music and everything like that. But that's why this is so important that I put on, you know, Digesting Black History 365. I mean, we're not going to do it 365, but what we're at least doing is putting people in a position to think and then react and then share, you know, because we got to share this. You know, it's just like, I look at it now more so than ever, how vital it is, because I'm learning every day. Yeah. Every time I sit down and I talk to Gwen, it's just like, wow, she tells me about somebody I never heard about.
Gwen is a wealth of information. She's a wealth of good and useful information.
Oh, most definitely. Without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. Well, I'm going to say I hate this because we got to end it. But I'm so thankful and grateful that you were able to be on Digesting Black History 365 podcast with us this afternoon, sir.
I'm glad to be here. I've enjoyed it. You know, you get a chance to talk about myself.
Hey.
Well, you know, let me say you're an incredible historian, an incredible musician.
Thank you.
And an incredible humanitarian. You're all of those things.
Thank you very much.
And I can't wait to hear you play live. But I'm going to ask just one small little question. Mm-hmm. What was your history, or should I say your method for Mr. Cool?
You listen to that?
Oh, yes.
I'm trying to do something commercial. I'm not a commercial type person. Mm-hmm. I thought about Miles Davis, you know, I'm a music theorist. You know, I taught music theory for, 20 years, I guess. And, I was trying some stuff, but I wanted to make it enjoyable, and not weird and abstract sounding, something that a person could enjoy. So, I think that that was over 20 years ago when I wrote that. And I thought about something that out of a Miles Davis kind of some of the more commercial stuff that he was doing before he passed.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where the inspiration came from.
Yeah, because I felt that in the video. I
Okay.
really did. I
All
felt
right.
that, it gave me a ride. It's like
Mhm.
you can get in your car and you can just drive on down Linda Boulevard, looking at the big houses and everything like that. And it kind of gives you that kind of growth, that flow. So anyway, once again, we thank you so much. We thank you so much for coming on, sharing things with us, and making you a historian, because yes, you are.
Okay.
You are a historian. All the stuff that you're talking to us about now, that's history.
All
That's
right.
digesting Black history. So thank you again, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. And you ought to interview Gwen sometime.
I've already had, but see,
Okay.
that's why she's my
All right.
co-host. That's why she's my co-host.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, to everybody, thank you again for tuning in with us. Once again, like, share, and subscribe to us. And once again, we'll be having t-shirts, we're gonna have coffee mugs, we're gonna have journals, we're gonna have everything to put on your desk for you to come and say, hey, you know what? I'm enjoying Black history all over again. And that's the thing. We're just trying to get people to understand your history is the world's history. Our history is our history. But we got to continue to keep on learning about it. Like Mr. Wells said, if we put ourselves in a position to learn our history, then we know that we keep putting it out there, but it'll keep coming back to us because it's generational. Our history is generational. So once again, Mr. Wells, I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both.